The most dangerous person in the room is rarely the loudest. They do not rush to defend themselves, they do not fight for attention, and they never waste energy trying to win every small battle, because they understand something most people never learn. Every reaction is a negotiation of power. The moment someone can control your emotions, they can control your focus, your behavior, your decisions, and most people give that power away for free. A single insult changes their mood. A little disrespect ruins their whole day. One negative comment pulls them into hours of emotional noise. But the people who truly understand power move differently. They observe first, they react last. Sometimes they do not react at all. And that silence confuses people more than anger ever could, because silence creates uncertainty. And uncertainty makes people uncomfortable. Most people think power means dominating others. Machiavelli understood something colder. Real power is emotional control. The person who controls themselves becomes difficult to control by everyone else. That is why the strongest people often appear calm, not because they feel nothing, because they understand the cost of emotional exposure. Every emotional reaction reveals information. It tells people what affects you, what hurts you, what controls your attention, and once someone learns your emotional triggers, they learn how to move you. That is why manipulators study reactions carefully, not words, reactions. A toxic person does not always want to hurt you directly. Sometimes they simply want access to your emotions, because emotional access creates influence. Notice how some people keep provoking small arguments, small comments, small disrespect. They are testing your emotional openings. The moment you react emotionally, the balance changes. Now they control the direction of the interaction. Most people never notice this happening. They think they are standing up for themselves, but many times they are only feeding the situation with attention, and attention is power. The person who controls your attention controls your energy. This is why powerful people protect their focus carefully. They do not respond to everything. They do not explain themselves to everyone, and they do not chase every misunderstanding, because they know something important. Not every fight deserves your presence. Some battles exist only to drain you, and weak people love emotional chaos. Chaos distracts. Chaos confuses. Chaos lowers self-control. Calm people are dangerous because they interrupt that cycle. Think about the last time someone insulted you publicly. Your mind probably reacted instantly. You wanted to explain yourself, defend yourself, correct the situation immediately. That reaction feels natural, but sometimes the fastest reaction creates the weakest position, because now your emotions are visible, and visible emotions are easy to manipulate. But something strange happens when you stay calm instead. The other person becomes uncomfortable. Why? Because silence removes emotional access. Now they cannot easily read you. They do not know if they affected you, if you are angry, if you care at all. And uncertainty creates pressure. Most people cannot handle silence because silence forces them to face themselves. That is why emotionally reactive people often keep talking when ignored. They need emotional confirmation. Even negative attention feels better than silence. Machiavelli understood this deeply. People reveal themselves when they cannot control your reactions. The calm person becomes the observer, and observers always see more than emotional participants. This is where most people misunderstand silence. Silence is not weakness. Weak silence comes from fear. Strategic silence comes from control. There is a difference. Fearful silence avoids conflict because it feels powerless. Strategic silence avoids unnecessary conflict because it sees no value in emotional waste. One comes from insecurity. The other comes from discipline. That discipline changes everything. Because once people realize they cannot easily provoke you, they begin exposing themselves instead. Their impatience appears, their insecurity appears, their need for control becomes visible, and suddenly the entire power dynamic changes. Now you are no longer reacting to the situation. You are studying it. That is real psychological advantage. Most people walk into social situations emotionally open. They reveal too much too quickly. They explain every decision, defend every opinion, react to every criticism. But over-explaining is often hidden insecurity. The more someone desperately needs to be understood, the easier they become to manipulate, because now approval becomes a weakness. This is why powerful people rarely explain themselves excessively, not because they are arrogant, because they understand that endless explanations lower perceived certainty. Calm certainty speaks quietly, insecurity speaks constantly, and people feel that difference immediately. Have you ever tried explaining yourself to someone who already decided not to understand you? Notice what happens. The more you explain, the more drained you feel, because the conversation was never about truth. It was about emotional control. Some people ask questions only to pull you into emotional reactions, not to understand you. And once you recognize that pattern, many arguments become meaningless. You stop trying to win emotionally rigged conversations. You stop proving yourself to people committed to misunderstanding you. You stop feeding situations designed to steal your peace. That is when emotional freedom begins. Most people are trained to react instantly. Social media made this worse. Now everyone reacts to everything. Every opinion becomes a battle. Every disagreement becomes emotional theater. People expose their emotions constantly, their anger, their insecurity, their desperation for validation, and the louder the reaction becomes, the weaker the control becomes. The calm person sees through all of it, because calm creates distance, and distance creates clarity. That clarity allows you to see hidden intentions. You start noticing who constantly seeks attention, who tries to provoke emotions, who enjoys chaos, who becomes uncomfortable when ignored. And one realization changes everything. Many people do not actually want connection. They want emotional influence. That is why silence feels powerful. Silence interrupts emotional access. It removes easy control. And people hate losing control over your attention. Notice what happens when you stop reacting to toxic behavior. At first, the behavior often becomes stronger. More messages, more indirect comments, more attempts to provoke you. Why? Because manipulators panic when their emotional control stops working. Reaction was their reward. Now the reward disappeared, and suddenly they reveal how dependent they were on your attention. This is why indifference feels so powerful. Not fake indifference, real indifference. The kind that comes from emotional discipline. The kind that no longer needs approval to feel stable. That mindset changes your entire presence. You stop chasing validation. You stop correcting every false opinion. You stop trying to control how everyone sees you, because you realize something important. People will misunderstand you no matter what. Some people misunderstand you because they lack information. Others misunderstand you because it benefits them emotionally. And no amount of explanation changes that. The moment you accept this, your energy changes. You become calmer, more selective, more difficult to manipulate. That does not mean becoming cold or emotionless. It means becoming intentional. There is a difference. Emotional people react automatically. Strategic people respond carefully. One is controlled by emotion, the other studies emotion before acting. And that pause changes power completely. Because most mistakes happen inside emotional urgency. Manipulators know this. That is why they create pressure. Pressure forces reactions. Reactions create mistakes. Mistakes create control opportunities. But calm people slow the process down. They think before speaking, observe before reacting, and sometimes they choose silence instead of emotional participation. That restraint protects them. Not every truth needs to be spoken immediately. Not every insult deserves a response. Not every challenge deserves your energy. And once you understand this, life becomes quieter but stronger. You stop entering useless competitions, because many competitions are traps. People compete for attention, status, validation, dominance. But quiet people understand something deeper. Constant competition often hides internal insecurity. People who know their value rarely need to announce it constantly. That is why some of the most powerful individuals appear detached, not disconnected from reality, disconnected from emotional desperation. They do not need to win every room. They do not need everyone to agree with them. They do not need constant recognition. And that independence creates silent authority. You can feel it immediately. A calm person enters a room differently. No emotional noise. No need to impress everyone. No desperate performance, just presence. And presence becomes powerful when it is not begging for approval. Most people spend years trying to control others. Very few learn to control themselves. But self-mastery changes everything, because once you control your emotions, other people lose many of their weapons against you. Insults lose power. Manipulation loses power. Provocation loses power. Provocation loses power, and suddenly people realize they cannot easily move you anymore. That is when respect changes, not always publicly, but psychologically. People become more careful around emotionally disciplined individuals, because calmness creates unpredictability, and unpredictability creates caution. This is why silence can feel intimidating, not because silence is aggressive, because silence hides emotional access. People cannot easily predict someone who does not react impulsively, and humans naturally become cautious around what they cannot emotionally read. That is real power, not loud dominance, not constant aggression. Control, internal control. Machiavelli understood that power is often invisible. The strongest position is not always the loudest one. Sometimes the strongest position is emotional independence. The ability to remain stable while others lose control, the ability to walk away from emotional traps, the ability to protect your attention like something valuable, because it is valuable. Your attention shapes your mind shapes your actions, and your actions shape your entire life. So if someone constantly controls your emotions, they slowly influence your direction too. That is why protecting your peace is not weakness, it is strategy, and most people realize this too late. They spend years reacting emotionally to people who never deserved access to them. Years proving themselves, defending themselves, explaining themselves, only to realize the strongest response was often silence, not fearful silence, controlled silence. The kind that says, I see what this situation is trying to pull from me, and I refuse to give it. That mindset changes a person completely, because now your emotions belong to you again. You stop living emotionally available to everyone around you. You stop giving strangers control over your inner state, and once that happens, something strange begins to change. You feel lighter, calmer, harder to disturb, not because life became easier, because your reactions became stronger. That is the real shift. Weak people believe power means controlling others. Strong people understand power begins with controlling themselves. And the moment you stop reacting to everything, most psychological games lose their power over you. In the end, the people who win quietly often understand one thing better than everyone else. Not every battle deserves emotion. Not every opinion deserves attention. And not every person deserves access to your mind. If you study human behavior deeply, Illu Codex is built for that. And maybe the coldest realization of all is this: the moment you stop needing to prove your power, people start feeling it on their own.